Hi, my name is Sasha Lightfoot, and this is Elizabeth Colgrove, and we're with Landlord Help Hub. Today, we're going to talk to you about how to write a lease. This goes hand in hand with our course on how to screen a tenant, and we thought that they would pair nicely together.
So I'm going to take point because if you have been around or seen anything from me over the last 10 years, you will know that this is my passion project. I am a huge believer in like everything is in writing, everything is in your lease, and if it's not in writing, it doesn't count. Unfortunately, I've had some painful experiences over the years. When things have been going the worst in my life has been when my rental has tried to act up. One of my favorite but most painful experiences was we lost a friend of ours in a pilot incident about 10 years ago, and I was young. I just started. I didn't handle it well. Honestly, couldn't tell you I'd still handle it well, but like back then it was really tragic. And I'll never forget, someone called. It was a fellow military, knew exactly what was going on, like all the things, and they go, I'm so sorry, but we have to move. And they come up with some BS excuse because basically they found a better deal and it just works for their family and they just want out. And I just remember, like, I still to this day remember standing in this kitchen going, are you kidding me? And I'm like having to deal with all of this. And they always start with, like, let's talk about it. And to these days, those are my least favorite words. Let's talk about it because you're negotiating, never in a form of strength. And so, like, you're losing. And I remember at that point, I was so thankful because I had like gotten on my lease kick and I was like, it's in the lease, like, here's the rules, et cetera, et cetera. And like, suddenly, when they're gonna have to pay $10,000 and give me 2 months notice, the house was just fine. So I go back to this, like, you need to have it in writing. You need to hold tenants' feet to the fire. And the only way you can do that is that when it's done, because the reality is landlording is the best thing that's ever happened to me, I think to us, but it never happens at great times. Like the worst times in our life is when there's issues and there's things. I mean, heck, you and I have been trying to work on this course, and I have been dealing with a leaking propane tank the entire time. Thankfully, my lease had whose responsibilities it was, and I was able to work with my tenants, and it was fine. But like the reality is, this is why I'm passionate about the lease.
Well, and I think that you highlight when a tenant calls you, it's not a time to figure it out.
Mhm.
The lease is when you figure that out. And I think we've talked before about how having everything in a lease makes a tenant more comfortable in knowing their responsibilities, and it makes a landlord comfortable in knowing their responsibilities. So it can be a go-to place for the answers.
And I find, so when I first started, I had a 14-page lease. Now I think it was 29 and a half. I'd have to look at it. It's new from yesterday. And honestly, our tenants have all been like, but excited and willing to work with us because it has both of our responsibilities laid out. Now, it's not saying that tenants aren't nervous about it. That just means that's your position to sit down and go over it line by line and explain why each is written. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few minutes and we're going to go through kind of the idea of what you do. So what I always do is I take a state specific lease, a city or county if it pertains to that. Like for example, Berkeley, you're going to want a Berkeley lease, right? And then if it's a really like very tenant specific area, you need to find a lawyer. But what we recommend you doing is take a state specific. Turbo Tenant offers state-specific edible leases that you can edit and change. Please keep in mind, this is not legal advice. We're just taking our years of experience, both as tenants and on the board, and we filled how many calls over the years
Many.
talking. So we're using these years of experience and like sharing our experiences. We hope that you will take the time below to share and experience. On Reluctant Landlord, we had like over like 30 comments on this page because this was such a great and people shared so much knowledge. So we hope that you'll do the same thing to Landlord Help Hub so that we can continue to be that source of knowledge and to share our stories and to help not recreate the wheel. So
Well,
let's get
before you
started.
get started, maybe touch a little bit on when you say like have a state specific lease, you're talking about each state has like a standard lease that can be used. but you can also add addendums to that
Mhm.
lease that may pertain specifically to your property, like whether it be a fireplace or a pool or something like that. So when you're telling us to go get a state-specific lease from Turbo Tenant, it's gonna have like the basics of a lease, but then
And then it'll have any like state like regulations or wording or like Melissa's law or like any like of these different things. Like California has a specific law because of a child, and I cannot think of the exact terminology, but like I know that some of that has to be in the lease. So you want to buy the lease from that state that has that terminology in it so that you follow all those state guidelines.
and then the addendums can be also state-specific, but really specific to your house.
Yeah.
Or your property.
So let's go through a couple and you tell me if I need to get more specific on something.
All right.
So one of the things is please keep in mind that we have been doing this since 2009, right? And I've been doing this since 11. So some of what we tell you was from a different time, but I still think that the knowledge is the same and it's something that we want you to keep in mind. So if any of our information seems to be not pertinent, and I'll explain in the very next one of why I say these things, then like feel free to like ignore it, but I recommend you file it in the back. There is one that I'm going to tell a really funny story. Cheryl, if you ever watch this video, tell you I love you. You know, I and her got into it. I was a young 25-year-old know-it-all with 4 houses under my belt, and I told her she was silly. It is one of my favorite lease addendums to this day, and I still love it and use it. So, Cheryl, I love you. Thank you for battling this redhead to the ground.
Fair enough.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay, so appliance included with rentals. One of the biggest things that we say, and this is where I said, like, understand the different times. So back when we got started, a lot of us bought foreclosures and short sales. So someone like had a very expensive house and then they couldn't pay on it. So they either shorted the loan. It was not a short sale. Like in the time, it was a short on like what they paid on the loan, or it foreclosed on. So you would get a lot of fancy appliances. Some of the biggest things I would see is like ice makers in like the kitchens. You would see trash compactors. You'd see like pull out microwaves. So like these are like $3,000 to $5,000 appliances, like things that you would never put in a home, but like if you bought it in the home, awesome. The thing is, appliances in the rental, the house is expected to be kept to the same level that you bought. So if you had a trash compactor and it broke, you were expected to put it back in. So it was really important back then that anything that you were not going to replace, that you put as is, otherwise you got that repair ban and had to replace that appliance. So one of the biggest things that we like to say is like if there is anything that is as is, we wrote in one of the other courses, like you do as is washer dryers. So make sure that you put that in as is, otherwise you get that repair plan or replacement. Next thing, month to month. Personally, I don't have an auto renew lease. Again, this is a state by state thing. I don't do that. All of my leases go month to month, but in order to encourage renewals, because I don't do month to month, I have an increased month to month fee. Again, check that with your states. My states allow that, but that encourages a renewal. And if they're not going to renew, then that at least gives a price of what that usually has to be. I believe my number is $500, but it depended on the state and the house. But the idea is that if they did go to month and we didn't do the renewal, then that was what it was.
It would be $500 more than the current rent.
Yes, ma'am. Direct deposit, we do all of our stuff by direct deposit. We now use apartments.com or we do member to member, but we put all of that in the lease so there's no misunderstanding.
My tenants use direct deposit as well. It just makes it easier for them and easier for me, and it's just very steady. So if I notice that someone hasn't paid, it's usually it expired, you know, their bill pay or their automatic deposit expired or something like that.
Just be careful. I know Zelle, at least for Navy Fed, has a like limit. So if you have a very expensive house, you might run into a limit. And when I mean a very expensive house, I mean like above like $2,500. So also keep in mind that I heard like USAA was having direct deposit issues, and Navy Fed, if you have to do direct deposit over like $3,000 to another account, you have to go in person. So definitely like if you have a more expensive house, definitely like check it out. We like apartments.com. Yes, it's a 5-day delay, but they don't have a caveat on the number amount that it is. So you should check and see what your bank accounts are. Member to member, Navy Fed or USAA member to member is the easiest, but unfortunately that always doesn't line up.
Yeah, and it's important just to talk about that at lease signing.
Yep.
Like that way you can coordinate if the tenant has the capability to send you direct deposit, can you accept it in that way? Or if there's a way you can receive direct deposit, is that, applicable to them as well?
So we put late fees in there, we put pet fees in there. We have that we don't cover any utilities.
Mhm.
We also assignments and subletting. We don't let you do assignments. We don't let you do subletting. If you need to, it's called a break lease clause and it has a 60-day notice. So that's what we use for a lot of the issues like got a new job, congratulations, here it is. You and name the person is no longer going to be together in the house, no problem, here's the break lease. We find that solves a lot of those problems. They either pay the break lease or they get along until the lease ending.
Yep. It's cut and dry. It makes it simple.
So the whole goal of all of this is to make this super simple and super like cut and dry. So like it doesn't matter what's going on. You pull out your lease, you go to the page, go to the addendum, and you say, here you go. You're not talking about it, you're referring to the lease.
Well, I think that's important too, because a lot of times if there are issues with a tenant between a tenant and a landlord, usually emotions are running high. Whereas if you already have in writing when everything was, level and there weren't any high emotions, it makes it just easier to get to the answer and without anyone really getting angry about it because it was already agreed to.
Nobody remembers. No one does it. Everybody never gives the whole story. I mean, I'll never forget. I'm like camping at Disney. We are moving across the country. It's like my last hurrah. Kids are screaming at me. My 3-month-old is hungry. Things are happening and I get a call and it's from like someone I knew and I do it and I'm like getting chewed out because of something that is going down with a tenant of mine. And I had to laugh because I'm like, I gave you 2 years notice that this was happening, but everybody forgot about that part, right? And I'm like the big bad landlord, even though they literally had 2 years notice. But thankfully I had it in like writing with like emails, I had it by text, I had it by everything. So like when this all went down, like I was completely covered. So my biggest advice is like you always want it in writing, you always want it on multiple sources because it's always going to come up when everything is packed up and you're like your cabinet is put away, so your written copy is done. And so we always kept all the stuff. I mean, I believe Turbo Tenant has it, Zillow has it. They have it so you can actually upload your lease so that you have a copy. I can't tell you how many times that has saved me. I always send a copy. I now use DocuSign for all of my documents, so it's there so I can just forward it on. So I highly recommend you to put everything in writing. So like if you're like your daughter can paint this room pink, but you have to turn it back and you assume all liability and all this, put it in writing for the love of trust me.
Yes. I think that especially when you're talking about making changes to the house or making improvements, changes, same thing, but even to the interior or the exterior, right? Like some tenants may think that they can redo your landscaping. By redo, I mean like pull out shrubs and replant something that they would like.
And then send you the bill because you're supposed to thank them.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think those are all things that have to be really clear up front so that they can be addressed if they go awry.
So we don't allow any smoking in the house or on the premise. We discuss what maintenance is covered. We discuss when we are allowed to like enter, 24 hours notice, etc. We also, after a bad experience with a tenant of them calling the vendors and then not showing up, have $100 if you aren't there. You may just call the vendors. It's $100 fee if you don't show up. It's more to help like make sure that the behavior alerts because I kept getting $100 bill from my handyman for like wasting his time. We also, after a bad experience with a tenant, have an extended absence by the tenant that like if you just abandon the house, you can't just like not pay the break lease fee and let the house sit empty for 3 months because that violates our insurance and causes problems. So now we have like a 15-day extended absence amount. So like you can't leave the house unattended for so many days. That's not saying that we haven't had people go on deployment and not be able to keep their house, but they were responsible in writing that they had to have a housekeeper and they had to do all of this and like what it did to cover our insurance. And again, we're not trying to be the big bad landlord, but nobody wants when that pipe bursts and that
Mhm.
house floods to not have your insurance covered and then like have to sue the like you want to make sure that everything is covered because if something goes wrong, trust me, ask me how many calls I got in labor pregnant of things going wrong. Like you want it covered.
Yeah. Well, and you want to just make sure that the plan is already in place for when something does go wrong or to prevent something from going
Well,
wrong.
but as much to cover, right? So like not only is the plan, but you need to make sure that both sides have like full notice. So like we made sure that all of our tenants understood that this was in violation and therefore a responsibility.
Yeah.
We also had provisions like if we needed to sell the houses, we had the military clause, the STRA in all of our leases. We have what maintenance and tenants are responsible for. Like we even wrote like what to put on granite countertops, like what kind of sprays. We had that they needed to like certain windows in certain houses had certain things you had to do too. So like we got very specific so that they like understood their responsibilities and roles. We talked about changing smoke detectors and filters and steam cleaning the carpets when they turned it back and professional cleaning. We had an in-depth landscaping on their responsibilities, what they can, what they can't change. Are they responsible for weed eating and cutting the lawn and like all the things so that like sometimes you'll find that tenants think that if they run a lawnmower over it, like they're done. So you need to talk about how like if there's any shrubs or maintenance or what your lawns are. We built most of our houses these days to be tenant rentals. So like they're very simple landscapings, but we do have a couple that aren't simple because we lived in them. And those we're very specific about.
And I think you can be really clear with the landscaping of like, maybe they are mowing and edging, but does the landlord or the tenant supply the mulch? Who does the big tree trimming? Is it the tenant or the landlord? Who does, if you live in a cold climate, who's responsible for winterizing the sprinkler systems,
Or snow removal.
or snow removal? So that would be all something you would want to put in your lease so that when it comes up, it's already clear cut.
Because again, the last thing you want to do is be sick as a dog with the flu, finding out for the first snow that they think that you're going to come and shovel it.
Yeah.
HOA, that's a huge one. Do yourself a favor, hopefully before you bought the house, but like now do yourself a favor. Go figure out what the HOA rules are for your tenants and what your stuff is. I will tell you that we have sold houses because of HOAs and just how sheer difficult they were with tenants. I once had them like not allow a tenant if they had writing on their truck. I mean, it was a thing. I had no idea until the tenant was in. The tenant specifically asked me, and I was like, absolutely, it's okay. It was not okay. I was getting $1,000 fines. It was a thing. So, like, do yourself a favor, look at the rules and figure out what it is so that you can follow it. And then you can put it in your lease so your tenants can follow it.
And for me, I think most of our properties are in HOAs, and we give a copy of the HOA rules and regulations with the lease. So it's like an extension of our lease, and you will abide by the HOA rules, or you, the tenant, are responsible for any fines or violations. So it's kind of wrapped all into one in their agreement to live in that particular location.
Yeah, wish I had talked to her in 2011. So alterations, we have a really like in-depth on that. We talk about damages and renter's insurance. Put a number on your renter's insurance on what you require. Again, check state laws, but I once didn't, and the lady gave me $10,000 renter's insurance because I required it. I now have 300,000. But like put it because if you don't have it in writing and you don't do it, they're gonna do the bare minimum, and the whole point is to protect them, but they don't understand that. So like make sure that you help them by protecting you to make sure that you have these numbers in place. Home businesses, we don't allow that. We don't allow attic storage because all of our houses are in Central California where like the wood is not heavy enough to support what East Coast is and all that attic. So we put that in there so we don't have anybody collapse an attic on us because where we come from, it's absolutely okay, but it's not. So keep in mind that especially if you're in a transient area with not a lot of locals, You're going to have a lot of people that are used to a lot of different things. So explain to them what local is. Like, I'll never forget, we were in Virginia Beach and we were talking to someone. It's like, oh yeah, or we were in Virginia Beach and we went to Hanford and they were like, oh yeah, remember, like, look at these. And they're showing us how like the 2x4s or 2x4 instead of like 2x3. And they're like, oh, but if you go here, they're like, and I'm like, the builder is going to tell me I'm messing this up. But the point was, the woods were different sizes. And so what you could get away with in East Coast because of building code, you couldn't get away in California because of building code. So we put in our leases that said no attic storage because we would have people put huge things in the attic. So again, you want to put everything in writing so there's no misunderstandings. One of my favorite things I mentioned is the buyout clause. Back when we got started, a lot of people would come to Hanford. They would tell me they're signing a 3-year lease and they're never gonna buy. It's Hanford. And then like 3 months in, they would tell me that they bought a house and they were leaving. So we found that the buyout clause just made it very stressless and very easy of like, here's the rules. Congratulations, we're so excited, and then they would pay. The first person we ever did it to was a photographer. They had trouble qualifying. We were brand new, knew nothing. And we said, fine, and then like literally like 6 months in, and we worked with her and it was terrible. And after that, we had the break lease clause. Nobody ever had an issue with it, and it just saved a lot of heartache.
Yeah. And I think going back a little bit to being in different areas and maybe home maintenance is a little bit different in some regions than it is in others. I remember a tenant saying there's no air filters in these vents. And I was like, what are you talking about? Well, I have to replace the air filters, but there's no filters in the vents. And I'm like, oh, the filters are down in the actual like HVAC, like the actual furnace down in the basement. You have to pull out the big giant filters. And it just wasn't, I mean, the tenant was trying to do the right thing and trying to maintain the house, but they just weren't from that area where you had a furnace in the basement. They didn't know that that's where you went to do that. So it's walking through those home maintenance items in the lease process and orienting basically the tenant to the house.
Because remember, most people are going to do their best. But this way, your definition of their best and their definition of their best is all same. And so you guys are all getting on the same thing. My pilots, and I work with a lot of them, called this the NATAPS brief. And it was always done with a little bit of humor, but it's the truth. And the more specific we've gotten over the years, the easier being a landlord has, because instead of like feelings and working with people and all of this, it was all communicated. We've always believed in grace and like doing our best, but at the end of the day, like this is it. And we have found that has been like literally game changing, because it's what allows it easier to operate, and it's what allows us to stay in the game. Because I'll be honest, I think you met me right after I became like lease. But our first 3 tenants, we had bought a house, and then we bought 2 short sales in Charleston that we'd gotten for 82 and 92,000, and they were awesome. And then we paused for a minute. We bought like all 3 houses in less than 12 months, and it was back in 11 and 12. And then we had a tenant move out, and then another issue and another issue and another issue. And then we like did everything we could. And then and we got burned. And I remember like standing, and we had just had to buy a 4th house because we'd gotten last minute orders, and we were so poor, so poor. And I'd lost my job, and I'd lost my professional job, and we were standing here, and they're like, we're moving out. And I'm like, you said you were going to be here for 3 years. You just asked to buy the house. Like, what just happened? And that was when I was like, the break lease is this, like, this is in your lease. And like, it saved us. And that is why 10 years later, like, not only am I still in the game, but we're teaching it, because this was what saved me. Like, I didn't have the money back then. And if I had had to, like, we might have sold the house. I mean, we didn't have the money. And then we were like, because I had to fly back and I had to deal with the house and all of the things. So this has been what has allowed me to be successful. Again, you need to talk to the lawyer. When we had a whole bunch of houses in California, like we had a retainer and we had a lawyer, and we used them a lot. So like I can't stress enough the importance of legal. But I will tell you that having an in-depth lease and going through it has been so important. So like we talk about alterations, we talk about if you paint, we talk about how getting permission, so that when someone like said they painted the wall with my permission and the lease says it has to be in writing, and I go, please show me the email that's in writing or the text message that's in writing. So it's not my responsibility, it's their responsibility. And then suddenly it's either magically painted or I got the money.
Well, I would just want to highlight that I think you said something really important for landlords to hear is that the lease isn't meant to be something scary. It's actually meant to bring peace to the tenant and the landlord. And it actually might be the key to a landlord staying in the rental market, because having a really good lease does make it simpler because it's just spelled out.
This was the pivotal because there was no more emotions in it. There was no more like, oh my gosh, I can't afford it, because they knew about it, right? Like before they bought the house, they knew this was the responsibility. So what I found was that like people were always pushing the responsibility onto me, and then I was having to stomach it and I couldn't afford it. So when I was like, here is the rules, it made it easier. And honestly, it made me like landlording again.
Yeah.
When I had that lease and I had those rules and I had those boundaries, and it made it easy for them because they knew what the rules were. And 96% of the time when I'm like, and I always am positive, and you know that. Congratulations, I'm so glad you bought that new house. Per page 10, it's the break lease fee. So happy. Oh, you didn't want to, like, oh, I thought you were coming to Lemoore. Oh, you got different orders? Or like my favorite, it wasn't orders, excuse me. They got a new job on the civilian sector. They're like, I'm like, oh, congratulations on that transfer that you chose. I'm so glad that you get to move on. Don't forget, like per section, this is how we do it. You need to have your carpet steam clean. You need to have the house professionally clean. Here's your break lease clause. Here's your move out plan. Like, here's the form letter. I didn't have to talk about it. I didn't have to negotiate. I didn't have to explain how now the house has to sit empty because this is a terrible time. It's why I did the renewal.
The playbook was already written.
The playbook was already written, and it was written with grace for both sides. So let's keep going. Pest control, that's a big thing. Who takes care of that mouse on Christmas underneath the stove? So we have all of that. So like in Hanford, where black widows are terrible, then Juan Keep It Pest Controls, who we love, it's $45 a month. But we find that when you add all that into the rent, that it's not value. So we don't add any of that into it. We simply like tell them that like we had it and that they can spray and etc. And then it's on to them whether or not they pay for that. But we have that all in, that the only thing that we cover is termites. And the reason that we only cover termites, unless again, check your local laws, to our knowledge, we're all required, is because everything else is based on the cleanliness of your tenant. And the last thing that you want is like a roach problem or whatever, and you're constantly paying for it and they're constantly allowing it.
Yeah, or you become the liaison between the pest control company and the tenant because you have taken on the liability of providing that as a service. Whereas if they take on the liability of that service, the tenant can handle it with their own vendor as well.
And we try really hard to not take on any liability for communications or anything. And Sasha will tell you that I don't take my own advice. And that part of like my problem was that like I was doing a lot of the liaison for a tenant and it wasn't going well. Like I canceled and it was a whole thing. So remember your own rules and
follow the playbook.
Follow the playbook.
Step 1, write the playbook. Step 2, follow the playbook.
So there's a reason why you have it. I mean, like we had an extra day of issues all because I always give out my tenant's number and I ask for the vendor with the tenant's permission to talk to them. I was trying to do a solid and there was a lot of chocolate involved afterwards. How's that?
Fair enough.
So lastly, plumbing, we have it the tenant's responsibility unless it's tree roots, because those tampons, the stuff that flushable wipes, etc.
Never thought I would have to put in a lease. Please don't use flushable, or please don't flush flushable wipes down the toilet.
Like my favorite of all of this is I remember somebody like posted on one of the spouses pages many years ago that like her son threw something in her eye and like it wasn't working and she had to go to like the hospital an hour away and her husband had to take her and she had 3 kids and they just moved here and like all the things. And I was like, it was a Friday night. We had no plans. My husband and I like remember it was pre-kids, it was pre-everything. And we're going over to their house. And I think I had like 6 houses at this time. They only had flushable white. Like only had flushable white. And I caught myself in so much trouble with my husband because I was like, guys, I highly recommend you don't
You don't use the
don't use
flushable
these
white.
flushable white.
So
And my husband's
plumbing.
like, don't scoop them, Elizabeth. Don't scoop them. So yeah, like we put all of that in. So like when you get that $450 bill, it's not on you. So like if they want to do it, they're paying the plumber. And we have found that the first plumbing bill stops that action. Same things, changing locks. Like we don't make it our responsibility to provide keys. If you're locked out, you do it yourself. We don't absorb that. Play structures, trampolines, pools, and other large equipment, you need to talk to your insurance. We do not allow any of that because of the liability. We do not need to be sued when somebody's kid breaks their leg, fill in the blank on a trampoline. Same thing with a play structure. We've seen over the years on the different forums where people will like sell it for $1. They'll do all kinds of funky things. Feel free to look through the forums to see what people have done in the past. Talk to your insurance. I don't advise anything. All I tell you is to do your research. We try not to leave those things.
Yeah, just do your due diligence and see what your level of liability you want to assume.
And then lastly, roommates. We do have a roommate clause. You need to check on your local ordinance. It appears I missed 2 that were really important. Renting sight unseen. So we've seen this a lot. We allow it. I see it 50-50 because the number one complaint you see a lot is I got here, it's awful. So we make them sign a whole addendum that goes through, you're seeing this sight unseen, you assume all the risks.
Yeah.
So like they know it. Like we can't guarantee anything. We can't guarantee how old the photos are. Like you've made this decision. We have found that that has cut down our problems almost to nothing. That when they make that do that, because the biggest complaint is like, how dare you not let us? And so we are like, we've had a lot of problems. So we allow this with this addendum. The other thing, Cheryl, I love you. So we'll finish this off with, I hope that you take all of this with like grains of salt. As you go through your own landlording journey, you will figure out what you value, what you believe in, and stuff. One of the things when I first did it is someone said that they made the tenants cover the first $100 of any repair. And I was so indignant. Do you remember this? So indignant. How dare you? Till I kept getting called for stupid light bulbs and filters and oh my God, all the things. I mean, I was like getting like paper cut into death over like all of these things. And Cheryl goes, Princess, do you remember that? Oh, I got schooled and it was for all. So I hope that you take all of this with a grain of salt. That is one of my favorite things. Our tenants, any repairs under $250 is our tenant's responsibility. And the reason I chose $250 because that includes the garbage disposal that everybody likes to put down the
Potatoes. I found rocks in one of my garbage. I'm not kidding. Someone's small child dropped rocks in the garbage disposal and they were wondering why it didn't work. And bless them, but I had to dig the rocks out of the garbage disposal that I think I had already called a vendor out to look at once before. So anyway.
So that is why I picked $250. So I hope that this is just enlightening. I hope that we've done some entertainment.
It's a conversation.
I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. We started Landlord Help Hub because we wanted this to be an open conversation and for people to be able to learn from each other. The wheel does not need to be rebuilt. You're not going to make $1 million this year, but like if you stay in it, if you do it, we strongly believe in this. So I hope these tips and these tricks have helped you. I've talked about how I don't hold it. I've talked about how I don't do multi-year leases typically, unless it has specific value, like my husband's deploying, or there's some value to us because rents have gone up so much, or life changes, et cetera, et cetera. We like the house to come up during moving season. I think we've talked in a couple of different courses about how it's really important.
Timing
matters. So in our market, we make sure that if the leases are not like, let's say we move in April one year, the following year will be a 14-month lease, the land end of July. We also work, if you have multiple homes, make sure that you check them so they're not on the same date. not that it's ever happened to me. We talk about putting everything in writing, rent by direct deposit. I never negotiate a lease after it's signed. When it's signed, it's signed. And I hope this helps. Like this, we really wanted to
This
be
will
about
be the
you.
key to your landlord success. I really do believe that.
It's been my key.
Yeah.
It's been my game changer.
This combined with how to screen your tenants and read the background check and place the right tenant, both with your pricing and your listing and your, background checks and having a airtight lease, that is like the solid foundation that every landlord has to have, no matter if they have one house to 10 to really any, really.
So we believe in this so strongly that in our
Bundle,
thank you, in our bundle,
your stay in the market bundle.
in our Stay in the Market bundle, we've included the book that I wrote a couple years ago.
Includes all the addendums that she's talking about.
Yeah,
So
and it also has an explanation, so like you guys can talk about it and go through. It's been in our community, it's been highly sought after and had great things that people have reviews over the years. So I hope it helps you. We've also included some various examples and all of our stuff in our various courses. So in these courses, we hope that you enjoy our examples and we find that they help you as inspiration. We're just landlords, but we wanted to give them to you because we believe in not recreating the wheel and giving inspiration for you to go on your journey. I and Sasha truly hope that this helps you have a terrific journey. You will have a bad day, and our goal is just to make sure that it doesn't become like the thing that ended your experience.
we hope that you join us on Facebook and join us on our YouTube channel and stay really connected with the Landlord Help Hub community.
And the best, like, please watch all the courses, participate and see all the examples. But once you've watched and once you've seen a basic, come join our groups and really participate because we've had a lot of value over the years of being shared. We are producing this because we really feel like there needs to be resources. So when you say, I want to rent out my house, that we have something to tag for you to see that you can see at 11 p.m. and you don't have to like wait and you can learn. But I will tell you that the thing that we've learned the most over the years is just following that once you're on your journey, following these pages, sharing, learning, giving experiences. I mean, I posted the other day on a completely different manner and people, because someone said not to talk finance. And if you learned anything about us in any of our courses, I talk finances. So I am a redhead. I don't always behave myself and I'm a little fiery. And I passionately believe that we need to talk about these things. And so I had wrote something on a completely different board and someone was like, you don't share the negative. And I had a whole bunch of people go, she does. So I hope you come and learn and thank you so much for being part of our community.